begin the current Daf Masechta Shabbos Daf Tzadiches. Begin on the bottom of Tzadi Zayin base, 2 lines up from the bottom of the Yomit. We continue a discussion relating to the halacha of a Mishnah regarding throwing from one domain to another domain. Shiur co-sponsored by Kalvik and Yecheskel to any time in Daf Chaim. Appreciate everyone who's joining us. Some of these we're going to be speaking on today's Daf is throwing from one Rishus Harabim to another through a Rishus Hayachid. And we'll see that regarding if you could combine the two different elements of the Rishus Harabim, let's say 2 amas here, 2 amas over there. Also, we're going to discuss a roofed Rishus Harabim is not considered Rishus Harabim because we learned that everything from the Mishkan, and in the Mishkan, their Rishus Harabim was not a covered Rishus Harabim. Also, additionally, we're going to have some interesting dimensions in today's daf, is how the Krushim were laid out on the Agalas. The wagons, which is where we learn out the Malacha itself, from how they would carry from the wagons, under the wagons, around the wagons. So how exactly did they carry the Krushim? What was the exact layout? Whether the Krushim of the Mishkan were 1 amma thick all along their entire height, or if they were tapered at the top. Interestingly, although we generally see these pictures, we think that they were straight up, there is another opinion in the Gemara that holds that they were actually tapered at the top. They went up like on a diagonal at the top. Additionally, then the Urias, which were the various coverings of the Mishkan, we're going to see how exactly did they fall on how did they lay and drape over the sides, depending on how the Krushim were structured. We're going to see that there's going to be different dimensions according to the different opinions. So we begin the current daf. So the Zayin and Beis, 2 lines at the bottom of the Yomit, where we continue with this halacha of Hazayrik, which is the topic of our parent. Someone's throwing from one Rishus Harabim to another Rishus Harabim, Rishus Hayachid, and there's a private domain in the middle. So essentially, someone's house he's throwing from, let's say, one street to another street over someone's private property. So it says the Brisa, if it passes through Rishus Harabim, Daled Amas, an area of 4 amas. Now, it's even through combination, which is in this Rishus Harabim it's only 2 amas. In this Rishus Harabim it's only 2 amas. But throughout the 2 Rishus Harabim, it's going to be a sum total of Daled Amas. So it's going to be liable because it went Daled Amas in Rishus Harabim. As we continue to tell the Chesam and Alpha, let's say Pachas Marabamas, let's say it went less than Daled Amas. So Pat, you can be exempt because you didn't do Haitzah, which is taking from one domain to another domain, which the Gemara is going to tell us shortly. This Chiddush is because you don't say Klud to Kamisha Honcha. You don't say because it was contained in the airspace of Rishus Hayachid. Oh, wait a second, you did Hachnasa, you did Haitzah. No, you didn't do that. So if it went less than Daled Amas, you didn't carry Daled Amas from the Rishus Harabim. And you didn't carry from this domain to this domain because we don't say, according to this brisa, klud to k'mishal uncha, that if it's in the airspace, it's like land, which the Gemara explains this. Says, my kamashma, what's the chiddush of this brisa? We know, daled amas yichayev, less than daled amas yipater. So there's 2 chiddushim. Ha kamashma, what the brisa is coming to teach us by both halachas is, first of all, that rishuyos, domains that are the same, they're mitztarfers, they combine. So this Rishus Harabim is combined with this Rishus Harabim, which that's not like Rabbi Yesi, who the Gemara said on Daf Peyam at Aleph, that he says even in one lapse of awareness, if you're carrying out, if it's to one domain, you're going to be chayiv. He says if you're carrying to 2 different Rishus Harabims, he says you're going to be pater. So here we're saying that not like that. Here we're saying that yes, you could combine the 2 different Rishus Harabims, 2 amas from this one, 2 amas from that one. And additionally, the other chiddush, the other part of the halach is with the loyamin include the kamasha honcha, like we said, that we don't say there was contained in the airspace that is like it landed, because then even if it went less than Daled Amas, you would still be chayiv. Even if it goes a half amma, if you go from Rishus Harabim to Rishus Yachid right outside the door, you're going to be chayiv. He was saying that no, you're not going to be chayiv if it went less than Daled Amas because you don't hold klud to kamasha honcha. Now we continue with a related halacha of Daled Amas and Rishus Harabim. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, Amar Rav Abba, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. Says Hamav Daled Amas b'Rishus Harabim Makura. If someone goes and transports something 4 amas in a covered Rishus Harabim, a roofed Rishus Harabim, Pati is exempt. Why? It's not similar to the Jews in the Midbar, but that means, like we said, we learned that all the malachas and Shabbos from what was in the Mishkan. The Mishkan wasn't a covered Rishus Harabim; it was out in the desert, all the way out in the open. And therefore, if now you'll have a public domain, a plaza that's covered with some type of roof, then that won't be as a qualified Rishus Harabim to be chayiv. You have 600,000 people walking there every day. If it's covered, so then it's not like the dig limit, but you cannot be chayiv for carrying Daled Amas in Rishus Harabim. And that is what? Yes, whatever it is. If it's covered, then it's not going to be counted because not like the dig limit, it has to be exactly like it was in the midbar. So that the Gemara has now, we're going to get into a whole discussion exactly why that's going to be like this. He says, is that really so? You tell me Rishus Harabim in the Midbar, they didn't have any area that's covered, and that if it's covered, it's not going to be considered Rishus Harabim? But Va'agalois, you had the wagons by the Mishkan, the Mekayris Havin, the wagons, they actually were covered. Why? How were the wagons covered? With the crushim, with the slats of the Mishkan were organized on the wagons. Now, as Rashi explains, the width of the crushim went along the length. I don't know if you can see that on this picture necessarily. Went along the length of the wagon, and the length of the crushim went on the width of the wagons on the top of the walls of the wagon. Now, the assumption of the Gemara right now is that it went along the entire length of the wagons, meaning you fill up, slats are longer than so you put it along the width of the wagons, and you'll fill up the whole wagon with crushim. So the whole wagon was filled up its whole length. Keep on putting up pieces of lumber, one after another, filling up the length of the wagon, the whole thing was filled up. So again, remember, the wagon was covered because it was filled with crushim. And therefore, says the Gemara, but V'amar of Mishum Reb Chiya, he says, Agolis, the wagons in the Mishkan, Tachtein, beneath the wagons, Ubenein, and between the wagons. Now, the significance of between the wagons means to say there were two wagons side by side. If you recall, when we explained the Mishnah, we said there was two wagons in front, and then two wagons in front of that. So, even though the crushim would go out on either side of the wagons, an area of 2.5 amas, and therefore the top of these boards would meet the boards of the other wagon that was on the side of it, because as we'll learn, there was 5 amas between the two wagons, as the Gemara is going to tell us later on. And the width of the wagon itself was 5 amas. How was the wagon itself 5 amas? The ear space of the wagon itself was actually 2.5 amas. But between the wall of the wagon and its wheel, including the width of the wheel, on the two sides, the total of the two sides was 2.5 amas. So the wagon itself was 2.5 amas, but then on either side, from the wall to the wheel, it has a little gap, and then the wheel itself takes some space. Two sides of the wheels were a total of 2.5 amas. So the wagons were were a total of 5 amas. So that's 10 amas. Then the gap between them was 2.5, meaning the gaps themselves were 5 amas of the total of the sides, meaning 2.5 and 2.5. So each wagon was taking up 5. So you had, and then you had the boards themselves that stuck out 2.5 amas on either side. Meaning, besides the wagon that took up 5, you had the 10 amas, because the length of the kerish was 10 amas. So when you put the length of the beam of the board on the width of the wagon, so it comes out, if it's the wagon is 5 amas and the board is 10 amas long, so it's sticking out 5 amas. It's on for a total of both sides, so 2.5 amas on either side. So it comes out that the entire area is being covered by the boards. It's makura with the rashi crushim, with the tops with the boards itself. So the problem is, it says that beneath the wagons, between the wagons, vitzidei, and the sides of the wagons, meaning the gap that's between the wall of the wagon and the wheel, including the width of the wheel, all those things are considered Rishus Harabim. How are they considered Rishus Harabim? You told me that Makura, Rishus Makura, is not considered as even if there's an overpass, it's not considered Rishus Harabim. But you're telling me that beneath them, it is Rishus Harabim. Besides, all these things are all covered with the boards, so that's Makura. How are you saying it's Rishus Harabim? Says the Gemara.
The fact that it moves doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, because all of that, everything was mobile. The whole midbar was mobile. But we're learning it out what it was like over there. So the Gemara says, Kikam Rav. When did Rav say beneath them is Rishus Harabim? It's b'darasa. It's the gaps that's between the crushim. Meaning to say that when you would organize the crushim, you would pile up the lumber one after the other. So you'd put a gap and then make another pile and then another pile. So in that gap wasn't covered. That's what I mean. Tachtein was Rishus Harabim. So the Gemara says, wait a second, let's see, how does this work out actually? Orcha de ergala kama. What?
It says clearly tachtein.
Yeah. So Tais discusses why tachtein of that, but the Gemara explains tachtein means in the gap tachtein. in the gaps, those gaps were Rishus Harabim because they weren't being covered by boards. You'd make a pile, a gap, a pile, a gap. The whole thing was not filled up.
He says Beneim, Tachtein, Beneim, Vetzideim.
Right.
So,
Which Tachtein? Tachtein is in the gaps.
so
Underneath the wagons,
What is Beneim?
Benain is between the wagons.
Tzideim.
Is the sides of the wagons.
And Tachtein now?
Tachtein is beneath the wagon.
So beneath. So
Yeah,
how
but
do you
beneath
say-
is beneath the gaps.
Okay.
Beneath the gaps, that is not being covered. So in those gaps, that's Rishus Harabim. But the Gemara says, wait a second, how does it work out? Mefti, let's see. Urka de agala kamahabi. This is a little bit of a cheshbon. If you like this mathematical type, you love these types. If not, just hold on. The length of the wagons is kamahabi. How much is the length of the wagons? So it's chamashaman. We didn't explain that yet, but the Gemara is going to show this later on. The length of the wagon is, so again, we're going according to the length of the wagon, the length of Rishus Harabim is 5 amas. Pussy the kerish kamahabi. How much is the width of the boards of the Mishkan? Amsa palga. The width is an am and a half. Now, if that's the case, kama moisiv. How many boards could you put along the length? Remember, the length is like where you're putting you're putting the boards along the length. The width of the boards are on the length, and the length are on the width. So how much? Yeah. So this is it's exactly the picture. This is we have I'll explain in a second. 5 amas is the length of the wagon. So if the how many boards can you put along the length of the wagon? Is talasa. Only three rows, not more, which will take up, if each one is an am and a half, so that's going to take up 4.5 amas. So partially you're left with a gap of palgada amasa. You're left with a gap only of half of an amma in totality, because it's taking up 4.5 amas. Now kishadile mar beini, when you then go ahead and you're going to do equal distances between each row, you're only going to be left with a quarter of an amma in the gaps, because you have 2 gaps. You have only a half of an amma, and you're splitting that along, so you have a tefach and a half. Now that is, we learned in the previous stuff, what's called kalavidami. That's considered lavid, which is covered, because if it's less than 3 tefachim, we view it as if it's connected. So therefore, there is no open space over here. How do you say tachtein Rishus Harabim? It's lavid. So the Gemara goes for approach number 2. Says, no, wait a second. Misavi, did you think the crushim that the planks aposyaya have a manachlu? They were putting them on the wide side? Because the dimensions of the crushim have a length, it has a width, and it has a thickness. So did you think we put it on the wide side, which is a nam and a half? No, achudan manachlu. We put it on the narrow side, which each one is an amma, which because now you're going to have a larger gap of 2 amas, and each one's going to be an amma, which is more than lavid. So on that, the Gemara says, wait a second, this still doesn't work out. Because saif at the end of the day, sumcha, the thickness of the kerish of the beam, kamahaba. How much was the thickness? Amsa. Was 1 amma. As the Gemara is going to explain later on, that it was 1 amma. Now the problem is you thought, okay, if it's in 1 amma, so 3 rows of an amma, and 5 ammas, you'll have 2 ammas. Great, the 2 gaps will be each one an amma. You won't have lavid, and you'll have tachtein Rishus Harabim. No, says the Gemara, that's not what would happen. Then, if it's kama hava meisiv, then how many rows would you make on the wagon? You would make arba, like Rashi says. Obviously, as many rows as you could make along the length of the wagon, you would make, and that is, you would not have it too high up, because there were 12 krushim for every wagon. How do we know this? Because there were 48 krushim, 48 boards in the Mishkan. There was 20 for the north, 20 for the south, 6 on the west, and 2 for the corners by the west. Now, since the width of each one was an am and a half, and it's like we're saying, the narrow end is an amma. If you're going to make piles high up one on the other, they're going to topple, they're going to fall. So obviously, as many as you can get along the length, you're going to put it down. You want more rows versus less rows going higher up. So how many rows can you fit in 5 amas? 4. As Rashi says, why? What do you mean 4? Why can't you get 5? So Rashi says, no, 5 and 5 amas you can't, because you can't stop in to make it exactly 5 and 5 amas. You know, if you have exactly that amount of space, you're not going to get that on the airplane to get that exact dimensions. They stick it in, it's going to be too tight. Additionally, Rashi says there's also the rings that we'll talk about later on. There were rings in the crushing. You wouldn't be able to stick in five amas. So how many are you getting in? You're getting 4. So back to the question. So pashula amsa. That means to say you're left in the 5 amas. If you're having 4 of amma each, you're left with 1 amma. Kishadu lamar beini beini. Now when you're going to divide that 1 amma in 3 gaps between the 4 orders, kalavidami. You're back to lavid. Because now you only have a gap of 2 tfachim. 2 times 3, 3 gaps is 6 tfachim, which is the amma. You're left with lavid, so you have no tachtein, which is a rab. So the Gemara says, okay, wait a second. Hanicha lamanda. The Gemara says something that we're going to discuss in Amud Beis. Hanicha. This is very good that you're saying that the gap is going to be Rishus Harabim beneath it. Is lamanda according to the opinion that says that the crushim, that the beams are actually milmatan on the bottom, are ovinama. This we say that they're a thick anama was only on the bottom of the crushim. Milmalon on the top, kolon v'holchanad ketz, but they actually taper, they narrow to be a finger breadth on the top. So Shopper, okay, I could understand, you could say that there is a gap even between the 4 orders. You're going to have in this picture, you're going to have more than 2 tfachim, because according to that opinion, this is not an amma thick. This is getting tapered, as we'll discuss on Amud Beis. It gets tapered. If that's the case, that means to say you have larger gaps. Even though here you don't have such large gaps, here you're going to have smaller gaps. This picture is something for later on, but I'm just showing that if you're having narrow here, and you organize one after the other, you have these large gaps because they're only finger breadth between the 2 of them. You're going to have more than lavid between the orders. Fine, I understand according to that mandama. What?
Put it like this.
Oh, Taisus discussed that. They could have done that. Taisus is not going to go through such a tircha to do that. But Taisus, yeah, that's Taisus' question. But we're presuming that they organized that way, so then that's going to make sense. According to the one who says on the bottom we're sticking amma. So too on the top we're sticking amma, which the Gemara is going to discuss this machlekes Amud Beis. So Michael again. So then we're back to the question: what are you going to say? Seemingly that, like we said, you're not going to have a tachtein Rosh Hashanah because you have love. Says the Gemara, Rav Kana. He says ba'at bi'i. Now what is ba'at bi'i? So Rashi here on Amud Aleph has a whole lengthy discussion, which his preferred interpretation is actually on Amud Beis. And Rashi says that atbi is like what's called atba desafi, which is paper clips. It's brought in Gemara Menachas of Amud Beis that what they would do is that Rashi just describes what we would call it would be a primitive paper clip. They would take a piece of wood and they would chop crack a piece of that board, but you have a board now with a thin little hole inside of that. That would hold the papers inside of that. So what do we mean we're making it like ba'atbi? Is that actually we would not make a space between every single row as we thought up until now. Up until now we thought, okay, you make a row, a space, a row, a space, a row, a space. No, because they're so high, when you have these 3 boards, because you're having 4 rows, and then you have 4 by 3, so you have 3 boards, one on top of the other one. Since the thickness is only an am and a half, and it's actually, no, meaning it's on the narrow part, which is an amma. So it's going up an am and a half, so it's going to be a height of 4.5 amas. 4.5 amas high, 1 amma on the width is very narrow. It's very narrow. You put on boards 3 upwards, so not more than that, it could topple. So rather, they wouldn't have 1 row, 1 row, 1 row. They would put 2 rows of 3 near each other. So you have 1, 2, 3 next to another one. So that's like a paper clip. We have this little gap that you have that one near the other. So to make it that it shouldn't fall down and it should hold one the other. So it comes out that actually what's in between, so each one of these together are 2 amas over here and 2 amas over here. That means to say that what's in the middle is a gap of an amma. So therefore, yes, tachtein Rishus Rabim, because there's no gaps between this one and no gaps between this one. So the 4 that you're having in the 5 ammas is 2 and 2, and then you don't have like, okay, 2 tvachim, 2 tvachim, 2 tvachim. No, you have 1 amma in the middle, and therefore that's where you can have tachtein Rishus Rabim, because there's no lavid over there. That's how the Gemara explains why tachtein Rishus Rabim, even according to the Mandama, that on the top was also an amma. Now the Gemara asks, which according to Rashi is a little bit difficult, why the Gemara mentioning this one idea, which Taisus disagrees, gives a whole different interpretation. But the Gemara says, At be'heichem manachlut. So tell me, wait a second. This paper clip dimensions of the crushim, where'd you place them? So it's like kavah da'gal. on top of the wagon, like we explained. So the right way Rashi explains the Gemara. So I understand that Tzideihen and Beineihen are Rishus Rabbim, because when you're going from one wagon to the other wagon, there is a space that's along the between them too, because the question is not covering the whole area between them either, because there's a gap. So I understand their sides, I understand in the middle, between them, but the problem is Tachtein. He still doesn't understand why Tachtein is Rishus Rabbim. Why? A Gala Gufa Makara Havia. The Gemara assumes now that the wagon itself, on the bottom, like our wagons, are covered, where we load it up with earth and sand for building, where there's a bottom on the wagon. So the bottom of the wagon is covering the Rishus Rabbim. So forget about the crushing. The bottom of the wagon is covering. How could you say Tachtein Rishus Rabbim? Forget about, okay, so there's a gap. It doesn't make a difference. The bottom of the wagon has a bottom. That says the Gemara. Mishmol, he says, be you say this. We're talking about that actually did not have a floor. It only had pegs. And there was a gap between the pegs. Like when we have the wagons that are made to carry wood, that's the same thing, and therefore it was not Makura. And therefore, now we understand how it could be Tachtein Rishus Rabbim, because it was not covered. And yes, this was all to sustain the halacha we started off with. We said if you carry down amas in the Rishus Rabbim Makura, it's not considered carrying, because that's the Diglei Midbar wasn't covered. We said, what do you mean the wagons were? And we said, no, the wagons were not covered, and therefore you could say Tachtein Rishus Rabbim. Now we continue with the machlokes we mentioned Amid Al. Turn over in the Bryce. The Crushing, the Mishkan boards. Melmatan Oivin Amma, on the bottom they were thickness of an Amma. Umelmalan, the first opinion says, Melmalan Kol Maholchan Ad Ke'etzba. On the top, it narrows and it goes to like the finger breadth of the thickness of a finger. How do we know this? Like it says the pasuk in Shemais. It says in the pasuk in Perich Vav, it says that they were flush on the bottom. They were meaning because the Mishkan boards went along the whole walls. That were the walls of the Mishkan, and together the pasuk says you sam mal reishay. They should be samim on the top. Now, what does it mean they should be samim on the top? Now, there's a pasuk in Yeshua that says, Tamu, they ended, nichrasu, they were cut off. What that's in the context of the Jordan rivers through Yeshua. Now, just like over there, Tamu means ending, because the waters ended. So too, when it says Tamu over here, it means a term of like ending, like stopping, like being finished off, which means say, because the top, al reishet samim, means to say it finishes off, meaning it disintegrates, because it goes to like a finger breadth and it just totally disappears. That's how we know, Dibri Yehuda, that on the top they were like that of an etzba, because it would just deplete, it would just go until there's no thickness anymore. And he disagrees. He says, no, just like the bottom was a thickness amma, so too the top was also, this is how most pictures of the Mishkan you'll see will be like a Nehemiah, that on the top was also that of an Amma. How does he know this? Like it says in that pasuk, it says Yachtov, together, which means to say that they're all uniform, that they're all the same, which means to say that no, there was no differences getting thinner and thinner. It was the same from the top and the bottom were all an Amma. Now the Gemara asks on each opinion, what does he do with the other one's source? I Baksiv Tamim. It says Tamim, which means like from the other, Tam means like it's like finished off, which means to say that it tapers till it has no thickness. So Nahu, Tamim could also have a different definition. The Leisu Shleiman, the word Tam also means complete. It should be complete, meaning Leisu Denisra. You shouldn't bring one board from two different pieces. It's got to be a complete board. You can't have it from two different fragments. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that it should be tapered off. It's still going to be a thickness of an Amar. Then the Gemara says, V'idich Nami, the other man, the Amar, Haksiv Yachtav. It says together, which sounds like it should be uniform. So how does he learn out that it's not going to be uniform, because actually it's getting thinner as it goes to the top? So he says, no, that Yachtav doesn't mean that the thickness of the board should be the same. Yachtav together is going on the boards of the Mishkan. It means the Loy Lishal Chafinu Mehadadi, which means to say that you should not have them pulled away one from the other, meaning one a little bit more in, one a little bit more out. Rather, you should have the crushim exactly one near the other. We want them to be exactly, which is going to be the thickness of one, opposite the thickness of the other. So in other words, when you're putting up the boards, don't have one board going in, one board going out. They should be yachtav, they should be uniform on the top. They should be all together one straight line of a wall. And then the Gemara says, Bishleman, we understand according to the one who's saying, Kashem Shalamatin of Yanama, just like in the bottom is the thickness of an Amma, Kach Maman of Yanama, so to the top is the thickness of an Amma. So Heinrich said, that's what it says the pasuk in Shemais. It says, Liyarchase HaMishkan Yama, the end of the Mishkan on the western part. So when you're walking into the Mishkan, The part that's on the far end is the western part. You're coming in from the east, and actually this picture is like where you're coming in from on the east. There actually is no wall on the east. There's walls on the north and the south and on the west. You're coming in, and so if you're going towards the west, which is where we're going to ask our question from, so the pasuk says Tasa Shisha Krashim. The west had 6 planks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, but there's also, like the pasuk said, V'shnei Krashim Tasa L'Mekutzais. You have to make 2 planks also for the corners. What does that mean? As the Gemara explains, the Asi Pusi Dahani, the width of these 2 boards are Memali Le Sumcha Dahani, fills up the thickness of this. Meaning, when you put 6 boards on the west, comes out that is a width, the width of 9 amas, because each one is an am and a half. The problem is the width of the Mishkan in the inside was 10 amas. So it comes out that the wall from the northern side and the southern side are each missing a half of an amma. So what you would do is, which the pasuk says this already, you would bring 2 boards, one for this corner and one for that corner. Now, as anyone understands anything about construction, is that what do? You have to fill up. It has to fit with these walls too. So this wall, you have to fill up the corner, and the corner is taken up by this side, and it also has to go in a little bit on this side. The corner has to get into it's being taken up by some of the thickness of the sides, and also it has to take up a half a amma from what we're talking about on the western side. So you would put next to those 6, and the thickness of the carriage, like we said, is an amma and a half. So it comes out a half a amma fills up the western part, and then the 1 amma is taken up by the thickness of the southern side, because the southern side is the amma part. There's an amma and a half, and the amma part. This is taking up. This is if you're saying this is like if you're putting it flush with the western one. So if it's an amma and a half, so 1 amma is covered by the wall on the sides, and then the extra half a amma, like we said, is missing, because we said it's only 9 ammas, the inside has to be 10 ammas, is a half amma here and half a amma over here. So it comes out, the corners are going to be equal. The Mishkan is going to be uniform, that the corners fit exactly in the south and in the north. That works if you hold that the top is an amma. Elamanam, according to the one who says Milmatan of Yanam, and then on the bottom it's a thickness of an amma, but Milman Kol Maholchan Adkats, on the top it tapers to that of like a finger. So the problem is high aisle, this one's coming in, but high nafik, and this one is going out. And that is because since you have the crushing, the boards on the south and the north, on the top, what happens is that we said the thickness starts narrowing on the top. So when you're putting the carriage on the corner, which we said is an amma and a half thick, so it comes out that the thickness of the carriage of the corner is sticking out to the south, or to the north, by both sides, above the thickness of the southern side. Because this is going in. Not such a great picture, you can't really see it so good, but if like we said, the crushing are not uniform, they start narrowing to finger. The problem is, if it's narrowing, the outer part is like this, but it's going up and up and up and up like this. If it's going up and up like this, it's going a little bit more inward. Problem is, the dimensions you just described to me for the corner one, when it's going to be going up, it's going to be up narrowing this way, but on this side, it's going to be sticking out more on the south than the southern part, because that's going narrow inward. So how does that work? So the Gemara says, because we said Yachtav has to be together, says the Gemara, actually the Shafilahu, what they actually did, they tapered the width of the 2-corner crushing, that it should narrow on the width too, that it shouldn't stick out. Kiturin, like mountains. Just like mountains are tapered on all sides, a mountain narrows on all sides, so to over here, what it was is, as you could see, if you could see, this corner one is not only narrowing this way, it's narrowing this way. So it actually was exactly like this side that it tapered on both sides. So therefore it was equal on the top. That's what you have to say, according to that Manda Amar, that Melmatan was like an Etzba. Now we continue our related discussion. First, something a little bit parenthetical regarding the crushing. The pasuk says Vabricha Tichan. The middle bar, there was 3 levels of bars that went through. Actually, Taisa brings that there's a machlekes exactly how it was, but the way our Gemara says it is that there was you would carry the boards, and there was like a socket that you put these bars, that you would carry it with, and that's how Levim would carry it. So there was on the bottom and the top, and then there was what's called the middle bar, that the pasuk was b'toicha krashim, was inside the krashim. So the way a brisa learns a Tana, we learned benes hayomet. It was actually miraculous because after the boards were all put into their sockets, what's called adonim, on the western side and the northern side and the southern side, that's when they would put in this brichatich in the middle bar, and it went to all three sides, which no craftsman could do because miraculously it went and bent. It was actually put inside the boards and it bent all the way around, all three sides. That was a miracle how that middle bar was put in. Now, but the main thing we're bringing in now, which can take us to the end of the daf, is based on the machlekes we just brought before, with the Yehuda and Nehemiah. How were the planks structured? Did they go up exactly or did they taper on the top? We're going to have a difference in opinion. How did the uriyos, how did the curtains that were on top lay on the Mishkan, as the pasuk says? Pasuk says, "Ves hamishkan tasa es uriyos." The Mishkan, which is a name for the lowest uriyos, you should make 10 uriyos, 10 pieces of strips. Orich hayuriya achas, the length of each panel was shmeina ve'eser ba'am, was 28 amos. That's what the pasuk says. So we're going to explain exactly as follows. Shadi orchai. So what they would do is that they put the length of the panels. Again, each panel itself is 28 amos, and the thickness is 4 amos. So you put the length of the curtains, lepusi the Mishkan, on the width of the Mishkan. So kama havi. So how much is the So now we're going to explain. How much was the length? Estimatami. So each panel, as you see over here, this is the Yerisa Mishkan. Each panel is 28 amos long. Now, if you're putting along the width of the Mishkan, so dal esalegra. So you take away 10 for the roof. In other words, like we said, the cavity of the thickness of the Mishkan was 10 amos. So it was 10 amos wide. So now if you're going along the width of the Mishkan, you're putting this 28 amos along the width. So if you're looking at it, 10 amos are taken up by the width of the Mishkan. So Posh, how much are you left with? I can test you the basic, right? Matt? You're left with 18 amos. What? So this is where we're going to get. This is going to get interesting. Pashlu tes lahai gisa. So you're left with 18. You have 9 for the northern side. For tes lahai gisa, you have 9 for the southern side. But it depends, says the Gemara. It's someone just alluded to. L'Rebbe, according to Yehuda, that he says on the top it narrowed to be like that of a finger. So it's not diminishing anything on the top from the uriyos, because it's not taking up any thickness on the top. So when you're spreading it along the width of the Mishkan, so the 9 amos fall on the northern side, and the 9 amos fall on the southern side. So Megalia Amad Adanim. So what it does is that the Adanim, which were the sockets all the way in the bottom, are revealing. What we're going to see is we're going to just see the Adanim, which the Adanim were hollow, and the beams were carved out on the bottom in the middle. So you had the thickness of a kerish. I don't think, maybe we'll have on a different the picture of it, but as you can see over here, as we had this one, what happens is the crushim, this is one board, but the crushim in its one board, in the middle was carved out a half a amma thickness, of a height of an amma. And you were left with a half a amma over here, and a half a amma over here, and you have the 2 handles for each one kerish. And then you would actually also carve out on the outside and on the sides of the crushim so that it could go onto the socket itself. So when you stick it the 2 hands into 2 adanim, that actually the crushim are going to be, like it's called ishalachis, it's going to be uniform, there's not going to be any gap from the adanim taking up any space, because the kerish, each hand would go into one adanim, but the thickness of the adanim takes some space. But that's good because there's gaps over here, so it would be totally uniform. So on that we're saying that the one thing you're going to see according to Yehuda is only the am of the adanim, because here we're saying that you have the 10 amos and you have 9 over here and 9 over here, and the height was 10 amos, and the bottom of the kerish would go into the adanim, so all you saw was the adanim. That's according to Yehuda. But according to Rabbi Nehemiah, that he says that no, even on the top it was the thickness of an amma. So you're going to be taking away from the thickness of the crushim on the northern side and the southern side, an amma over here and an amma over here in the length of the uriyos. So it's only going to fall 8 ammas on each side. So megalia amma the crushim. So actually you're also going to see not only an amma of the Adanim, but you're also going to see an Amma of the Keresh besides the Adanim, which you have an Amma of the Adanim, which are the base, and then you have also an Amma of the Keresh that's going to be revealed, because you're not having 9 in each side, you're having 8 on each side, because you have to take up another Amma on the top. It's not just 10 Ammas in the inside of the Mishkan. You have another Amma for the tops of the Krushim, which takes away an Amma on each side, so you're left with only 8 Ammas. Now, the Gemara says another difference is Shadi Pusyayu. Now, let's go the other direction. You place the width of the curtains, La'orka the Mishkan, on the length of the Mishkan. Because, as Rashi explains, after you attach 5 strips to each other, so then you would have, because again, like we're saying, each one is a length of 20 ammas, but each one is also a thickness of 4 ammas. So that's a total of 20 ammas. 4 times 5 is 20. I used to teach math. I used to tell my boys, I go, you're going to have to know math because you're going to have to know how to learn Gemara. Come to one of these Gemaras, you're a little bit, this is not so difficult. But then there's a Machberes Hashenis. Then there's another part, which is another 5 Urias. So that makes for a total of Kama Havya. So how much was the width along the length of the Mishkan? Again, the width, because you're having a lot, is Arban, is 40 ammas. So Dal Tlosin Le'igra. So you're going to take away 30 for the roof, because the length of the Mishkan was 30 ammas. So Pashilahu, how much is the extra that you're left with? Is Yud, is 10 ammas. But then says the Gemara, it's going to depend again. Rabbi Yehuda, that he says that there's no thickness of the Krushim on the western part to diminish. So it comes out that entire 10 ammas is hanging, and it's covering the whole 10 ammas of the length of the Keresh. So even the Adonim of the western side, Mechasi Amad Adonim. This is covering the Amma of the Adonim, because nothing covers on the eastern side. It's covering on the western side, and it'll cover the whole thing, because you have 40 ammas, 30 ammas on the top, and 10 ammas over here. That's according to Yud. According to Nechemia, it's still going to be revealed, because he holds on the top was a thickness of an Amma. So it's taking away an Amma, so it only went 9 ammas down, and it was revealed an Amma of the Adonim. That's one step. Now we're up to the next Urias. What happened is that the pasuk says, "Vasisa Yirias Izim la'oil b'geimer," which these are the upper curtains, which were on the bottom curtains. The upper ones were called the oil. In other words, it was like a roof and a covering. The bottom one was called the Mishkan, because although it's not the Mishkan itself, but it's part of the Mishkan, which was to beautify the inside of the Mishkan, which was Tchelis and Argama and Telashani. It was more beautiful. The upper one was more like a cover. Like people you never see their chairs ever, because there's always that plastic covering the chair. So that's like what it was. You had the beautiful chair, you had the Urias of the Mishkan, and then you have the one at the top, the Izim, to cover that one doesn't get ruined. So that the pasuk says, you should make now not out of scarlet wool and blue wool. No, this was made out of goat's wool. That was la'oil b'gomer. Now the pasuk says, here the dimensions are different than we mentioned before. Here before we had mentioned that the dimensions were 28 amas. The Urias Ha'izim was longer. And that was, of course, if you want to make the cover is going to be a little bit longer. So here was 30 amas in the length. So the Gemara explains. Shadi Urchayu. So again, we're going to go through the same thing and just see the same differences. You place the length, lepusi the Mishkan, on the width of the Mishkan. So how much, like we said, is the length? Here it's not 28 amas. Here it's plus an amma. It's 30 amas in the length. So dal esel ikra. So take away 10 for the roof. Pashlu esel haigisi. Left with 10 on this side. But esel haigisi 10 on this side. But again, not so simple. Depends who you hold like. Rabbi Yehuda mechasi amadadam. So here it's going to, according to everyone, it's going to be a little bit longer than the previous one. The question is what exactly it's going to be. According to Rabbi Yehuda, now it's going to cover the adanim which was left over from the previous one, which was according to him in the previous one, this was uncovered. Now with the new coverings, it's covering the amma of the adanim. According to Nechemia, no, it's covering this one amma of the Keresh, but this amma adanim, it's still not going to be covered. It's only covering the amma of the Krushim, because again, according to him, you have one amma less because of the on the top. And says similar in the Brisa, like we're interpreting as a pasuk says in Shemais. The pasuk says that when it's talking about the length of the Urias ha'ayel, which we're talking about over here, that it's going to hang down on either side, covering a little bit more than it did by the Riyas HaMishkan, it's saying that there's going to be an amma more on either side, which is going to cover the two amas that are seruach, that are draping over, covering what was left over from the one beneath it that it didn't cover. So what does that mean? It was more than the other one. So the first opinion says l'chasis amma shel adanim de Rabbi Yehuda. Oh, that's to cover the amma of the adanim according to Rabbi Yehuda, like the dimensions that we described. In Mechemim it says no l'chasis amma shel krashim. It's only covering that one extra amma of the krashim, which was not covered by the Yeriyas HaMishkan, that is being covered over here by the Yeriyas HaIzim. Now, there's one more difference in the Yeriyas HaIzim. Shadi Pusyai, now let's go the other way. So let's place the thickness la'orka the Mishkan along the length of the Mishkan. So although actually it's longer, the thickness, that's only because we're combining many thicknesses. We take many rows and connect them together, but really that's what we call the thickness. The length was actually this way. This might be longer, but that's only because we're combining many different sheets of the Yeriyas to make the, so put the width along the length of the Mishkan. Again, so how much is the length of the Mishkan? So of the Yeriyas HaIzim, it's mem va'arba. It's 44. Why? Because although we said before the Yeriyas HaMishkan was only 40 in the length, but that's because there was only 10 sheets of the Yeriyas. Here there's 11 of them. There was another one because we wanted to make it more covered than the one beneath it. So what's 11 times 4 is 44. Now, dal tlas and igris, you take away 30 for the roof, meaning the length of the Mishkan was 30. Pashlu arbisrei, you're left with 14. Now, the Gemara points out something that we didn't mention by the Yeriyas HaMishkan, is dal tarti lekafla. So you have to take away from that 14, 12, 2 for the fold. What that means to say is that they would fold over a half of a Yeriyah on the eastern side where there were no krushim. That's the opening of the Mishkan. There was only like some type of a screen, what's called a V-line, that it says you should make a mesach la pesach ayil, but there's no wall over there. Now, the Chassid the pasuk says v'chafaltes Yeriyah shisha, so you should fold over the sixth panel el mul pnei ayil, to the face of the ayil. Similar like what a kala has, like covering a little bit over in the front. That's what you had 2 amas over here, which is half of a Yeriyah. Each Yeriyah was a thickness of 4 amas. Half of it was hanging over in the front. So Pashlu Tartis, right now we're left with, if you're looking on this side, we're left with 12 amas. So Bishlam Yehuda, we understand according to Yehuda that he says that the thickness of the krushim did not diminish anything in the Yeriyahs because it tapered to a finger on the top. So now we can understand the pasuk that says, Chatzi ha-Yeriyah ha-Yedefes. Half of a panel that was extra on the upper ones, more than the lower ones, should be draping over on the back of the Mishkan, which was draping over along the length of the krushim and the adanim on the western side, and it was dragging on the ground. How much was dragging on the ground? Half of a Yeriyah, like the pasuk says, which was 2 amas. But my tisrach, what are you telling me that it's dragging the excess on the floor? A half of a Yeriyah, which a Yeriyah the thickness is 4 amas, that means a half is going to be 2 amas. That's not true. The only thing it was dragging was 1 amma, because 1 amma was taking up the thickness of the wall. Says the Gemara, you're right. When we said a half of a Yeriyah was tisrach, which is 2 amas, it means tisrach mechavri seha, which means it was draping over more than it was from the previous one. Meaning, when it's saying it was dragging on the ground, that wasn't the 2 amas. The tisrach, the draping was 2 amas, because 1 amma was on the wall, which was taking up this one that didn't cover, and another amma is going to be dragging on the ground. And the Gemara concludes, Tana Rabbi Shmuel, that the Brisa taught in Yeshiva Rabbi Shmuel, Lama Mishkan Daima, what could the Mishkan be compared to? Le'isha shemaleches b'shuk, to a woman that's going in the marketplace, v'shipeleha, and the bottom part of our garments, like you see how a kala walks, and that's called the train that's dragging beneath her, is mahalcham nachareh, is going after her. So too, like we said, like a kala, she has a little veil on the top, there's 2 amas, and then it's dragging, according to this opinion, 2 amas, according to this opinion, 1 amma, but that's what's dragging behind her. That's how the Mishkan was in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Mishkan. And again, that's just, we said, is going to come out a difference between the 2 different interpretations, exactly the dimensions, based on that machlekes regarding how is the top going to be. Is it ke'etzba, or is it the same thickness of an amma? So some of the things we spoke about today's daf and Shabbos Daf Sadaches was, first we opened up a similar theme to that. We were discussing of Hazayrik, if someone throws from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah and it passes through Rosh Hashanah in the middle. So he said, depends. If it goes 4 amas, you can be chayv. What's the chiddush in that? We say rishuyas are mitzarfas, because even though here is one rishus harabim and here another rishus harabim, we'll say even though here was 2 amas and here was 2 amas, that they're going to combine. We're going to combine the two of them. Now we said if it goes less than dalet amas, you can be pater. What's the chiddush in that? That we don't say kluti kohon chadami, which it went through. Here was a rishus harabim, his rishus hayachid, his rishus harabim, and you threw it. So if you say kluta, so then that should be that you did hatzah nachnasa, saying no, you're not going to be chayav because we don't say according to this price kluta k'mishal chadam. Then we said, which really took up the whole daf, was that we said if you carry dal ramas in the rishus ram that's covered, you're going to be pater. Why are you pater? Because it's not like it was in the desert. We learned all the malachas from the Mishkan, and the Mishkan there was no coverings, there was no fancy anything. It was out there in the desert. So therefore, that's why you're not going to be chayav. That took up the whole Gemara, and the Gemara says, wait a second. The wagons were covered. Why were the wagons covered? Because the crushim were laid along the whole wagon. It took up the whole wagon, so it's covered. And you told me, Rav said that between them, and on the sides of them, it's going to be Rishus Rabim. Rishus Rabim? How's it Rishus Rabim? It's covered. You told me Makura is not Rishus Rabim. No, we're talking about Bedrasa. We're talking about the gaps. There's gaps. Gemara says, wait a second. What gaps? The gaps are smaller than 3 tvachim. That's loved. We consider that as if it's connected, as if it's covered. Because either way you explain, if you say that it's between the pusyam, between the thicker part, so that means say each one's an am and a half, that's a total of times 3 is 4.5. That means say you only have a quarter of an amma between each one. That's 2 tvachim. That's less than 3 tvachim. You can say love it. And even if you can say going on the achudan, on the narrow part, that's an amma, then how many you can be putting? You can be putting 4 in 5. That means to say between the 3 gaps, you're also going to have 2 tvachim. So therefore, you're not going to have a gap that's going to be Rishus Harabim because it's going to be loved, it's going to be covered. So then the Gemara says, I understand according to the one who says, which that took up the whole Amid base, that the crushim, they narrowed on the top like an etzba. Oh, so it ended like an etzba on the top. Because wait a second, there were gaps. Because even though they're amma thick, but that's only the bottom. Top, you have these large gaps. And someone has placed this question, well, what do you mean? Why can't you do it the other way? Yes, but that's not what they did. Now, just what we explained on the Beis was that Tamim al Reisha, how does he know it that on the top is like an etzba? Because it says Tamim, and we learned that from a different pasuk, Tamim, that was also being depleted, that finished off. It means it goes and it diminishes on the top. So, but the other opinion says no, that just means that it should be brought shleiman, it should be brought whole, not from fragments. And additionally, we said that according to this mandama, it has to be that you make it like a mountain, because or else the corners are not going to work out. Because you're going to have this one going this way, this one going that way. But we said, according to that mandam, I understand how you can have gaps, but according to the one that says even on the top was an amma, so back to the question, there was no gaps. So that the Gemara says, ba'atbi. We're talking about that they made 2 together and 2 together. And then you have the amma over here, that was the gap. And why they do that? Because they didn't want it to topple. So you did have a gap, and therefore tachtein could be Rishus Harabim. Now the Gemara just said, according to that mandam, how do you know that it was amma on the top too? Because it says yachtav. The other opinion says no, yachtav doesn't mean that it should be the uniform. It actually finished off an etzba. It just means that you shouldn't have one going this way, one behind it, one in front, but they should all be together. But therefore, that's the machlekes. Now, additionally, the Gemara says the wagon itself also on the bottom was not covered. Rather, it was with pegs. So again, we did have the possibility of having tachtein, Rishus Harabim, because it was actually not makur. Now, we also said that the B'rich Tichan was a miracle where it went around all 3 sides, through the middle. And then we finished off by discussing the measurements of the Urias, of the Urias HaMishkan and the Urias HaOyel, which is the Urias HaIzim, based on the 2 opinions of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemi, because like we said, are you going to be diminishing an amma for the tops? That's going to make a difference of how they lay. It's going to either count that as an amma or not, depending if you hold that there's taking up an amma on the top, to know how much they were laying on both sides on the Urias HaMishkan and the Urias HaIzim. Thank you to any time for hosting us.